So, I originally recorded this video, then I found out the recording sucks, so I'm re-recording. This video is going to be talking about how modern society creates mental illness. Now, disclaimer, I am not a psychologist. I have my basic understanding of psychology. I have a bachelor's in psychology, worked in the mental health profession, but I am nobody's therapist. However, I have more insight on psychology and mental illness than the average person, not necessarily due to the fact that I have a bachelor's in psychology. It's more so for the fact that I actually research certain concepts, and I've also made podcast episodes on such theories like Carl Jung's The Devouring Mother and things of that nature, so I know what I'm talking about. But I'm putting that disclaimer out there. I'm nobody's therapist, but we are going to be discussing how modern society creates mental illness. Now, I personally believe modern society creates mental illness is because we live in a worker society, right? Most people are workers. I'm a worker, you're a worker, most people are workers. Even if you are an employer, you are still a worker for the fact that your daily bread, just like everybody else, gets buttered by getting up and going to an establishment and trading your free time, your labor, for a monetary value, correct? Whereas those who are not workers are like Jeff Bezos because they own the means of production. They own Amazon. They don't actually have to be at the fulfillment center to have their bank accounts reach a billion, right? Jeff Bezos don't clock in, just like Bill Gates don't clock in, just like Warren Buffett don't clock in. And if Steve Jobs was still alive, he wouldn't clock in. So you get my drift. If you have to get up and go somewhere or do something to get your daily bread and you don't own the means of production, i.e. like Amazon, then you are a worker, right? And I think where this mental illness starts kicking off is around that teenage rebellious stage, because we grow up watching PBS Kids. We grow up listening, play by the rules, the tortoise beats the hare, have these moralities, have these standards, have consciousness, know what is right, what is wrong, how to treat your neighbors, whoop-de-whoop. Whether it's on a religious aspect in the sense of 10 Commandments or in a societal aspect in the sense of you don't steal, you don't lie. We have a certain construct that we organize our daily routines around, right? And as children, we are told we can be anything that we desire to be. And that anything could be a princess, can be a ballerina, can be an artist, could be anything. And as we grow up, we realize that facade is just that, a facade, right? Yes, you can be a ballerina, but there are certain constraints to being a ballerina. You have to be a specific body type. You have to be a specific weight type. You have to practice umpteenth amount of hours. And on top of that, ballerina shoes ain't cheap. Ballerina classes ain't cheap. And if you want to be the best at what you do, in the example a ballerina, you're going to have to shell out money. And a ballerina, that sport isn't the same thing as basketball. If you play basketball, you don't have to own a basketball court, because you can go to any public park and find yourself a basketball court. You can't just go anywhere and stumble upon a ballerina studio. That just doesn't happen. So you realize that there are certain blockages that block you from living your best life. And one of those blockages, if anything, the main blockages is money or the lack thereof. Because as humans, we move on three things. And those three things are positive reinforcement, meaning when you do something right and society claps their hands for you, you tend to do it again. For an example, positive reinforcement for a child would be, if you do your homework, then you get to stay up an extra 30 minutes. So the incentive is staying an extra 30 minutes past your bedtime if you do your homework. So there's a trade-off. Positive reinforcement. The more you do your homework, good things happen to you. As an adult, positive reinforcement would be, if you get this college degree, you join this club, you rise the ranks up in this corporate ladder, then you'll reach this amount of money, right? That's why the American dream has been formulated around owning your own home, living in suburbia, 2.5 kids in a picket fence, because the trade-off was, if I work and give my youth the most optimal, progressive time of my life, I have no illnesses for the most part, though there are people who do have chronic illness, but for the most part, people who are relatively healthy, right? You're young. You have no backaches. You ain't got no kids. You have no medical issues. You're at your prime. Your young adulthood is your prime. And the trade-off in the 50s and the 60s was, look, we're improving the conditions in the factories. We already agreed 40-hour work week is the maximum. We're paying you this rate. You have these benefits, and you can retire on a pension. That was the trade-off. Your labor at the factory guarantees you these benefits. Fast forward to modern times, 2021, the year I'm recording this video, we realize that that trade-off is not what it held up to be, right? Not only can you not be what you really want to be, as a kid, you could be whatever you want. As a teenager, you realize that life ain't all that it's cracked up to be, and there's a faultiness in this whole be yourself thing, right? And by the time you become an adult, you get into the workforce, you realize that you need to worry about how your bread is going to get buttered. You need to worry about your, again, positive reinforcement. So what job, what college, what committee, what group is going to get me to where I need to get to. The second fundamental principles that people are driven by is your basic needs, right? We're not just working for money just so we can have money and use it as confetti. We're using it because it allows us to buy our basic needs. Our basic needs that most people understand is food, water, shelter. Now, if we're talking about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, we're talking about something a little different. We're missing a couple of steps, but we're going to stick to not Maslow's hierarchy of needs, but the typical hierarchy of needs of survival, the basic elements, right? Food, shelter, and water, right? How do we buy this food, shelter, clothing? We buy this food, shelter, clothing via money, because that's the system that we live in. Most people do not have the skill sets that they used to. Half a millennial ago, 500 years ago, people knew how to build a home with the basic materials to make a livable home. Most people don't know how to create their home from literally the ground up. That's why people are tied to a mortgage, tied to rent, right? Most people don't know how to forage. People can't go in the forest and know the difference between poison ivy and wild spinach and something that's going to kill your ass. You can't tell which is which because we lost those skills. Becoming workers, we disconnected from our humanity, disconnected from source, and disconnected from our natural, instinctual skills. And some of it has been passed down, right? Prior to this worker system, the skill sets that were passed down from generation to generation was usually what your father did. And this is specifically for men because in those times, men were the providers. And unfortunately, women were stuck doing the nurturer, homemaking skills, or they were used as items, right? Dowry. You're a thing to be bought and sold. Let's be honest. That's what it was. And truth be told, it's still somewhat like that today. Honestly. But in the capacity of a worker, which your father was, as a young man, you would follow in his footsteps and you would be that too. Sometimes there were opportunities, say that you worked or your parents worked in a certain area, or perhaps you were a young kid and you were a factory kid, or you were a kid who were selling newspapers on the streets, or you were a little, miscreant. So you were just, stealing, robbing, doing what you do. But those other avenues, especially if you lived in those more industrial cities like the New Yorks and the Chicagos, where it was a hub, where it was metropolitan, there were some options there. But in more rural and more countryside, which your father was, most likely you would be that too. So you follow in that footsteps, right? But in modern society, we forgo all of the things that we knew, whether it was passed down through our fathers or family, or the opportunity because you live in a certain city. Maybe you were able to impress a certain person, you were able to raise the ranks. But now the work that we do is not for our own benefit, and it's not even for the community's benefit. Working at an Amazon fulfillment center is not fulfilling in the way of being an artist or being an explorer or being a philosopher. Things today we would scoff at because we would be asking, going back to the three things that pushes us, positive reinforcement, right? Society would tell you, what's a philosopher? That's not a real job, whoop-de whoop whoop. So we're hesitant to follow our true life passion. So we are repressing ourselves to fit into society's mold. You don't think that pushes us closer to mental illness? Second, motivation that pushes humans. What about our basic needs? How is our bread going to be buttered? Now, you could be a philosopher and you could have great ideas, but unless you can monetize that, or a capitalistic system like a Ivy League college or MSNBC segment or some other type of way, maybe a publishing deal. If you can't monetize your philosophical theories or anything that matters to you on that level, then in society's view, it doesn't matter. And not only in society's view is that insignificant, even what you're saying is hot shit straight from the dome of Jesus, no one's going to hear it or respect it unless there's some way that you can monetize it. All right? And then the third thing that pushes humans is our stability, right? Because we lack those skills. We lack our humanity. We're disconnected from nature. We're disconnected from source, right? This is why the conversation when it comes to God is usually restricted to fit a religious narrative. And then for those who are not religious or had bad experiences with religion, it pushes them farther away from their spirituality, further away from that God essence, further away from nature, because not everything has to be scientific. If it doesn't fit into the five senses, then it's not real, right? So we don't even connect to our humanity. We don't connect to nature because it seems so foreign to us. It's the material. It's the five senses. It's what I can control, what I can dominate. And that's the same thing we're seeing in modern society within our roles. Who has the bigger bargaining chip? Who has the bigger flex? Who knows who in high places and high faces, right? And you don't think that causes mental illness? In modern society, you can't be what you want to be, right? Because there's so many things that are blockages. Even something as simple as, I want to backpack across the country, right? Which used to be a thing before serial killers became a thing. In modern society, people are going to ask you, well, what about pay time off? And like, what about your rent or mortgage? Or what about all these constraints that keeps us stuck being workers, right? One of the biggest deficits that brings people into homelessness is medical debt. And truth be told, debt in general. Everybody got some debt on us, right? Whether it's student loan debt, whether it's a mortgage, whether it's a car note, whether it's consumer debt, so you got credit card bills, whatever the case may be. Most people, most Americans have some debt that they are tied to. And that debt occurs for some corporation, and the figureheads, the stakeholders, the CEOs, the board, the vice president, the president, they don't have these issues, right? But it's you, the worker, who is tied. They're not tied. That's why, for example, the John Deere strikes, those workers are on strike, not because they're lazy, not because they don't make the company money. It's because they made the company more money during the pandemic than they made before for the company. So the company is richer, and they are rewarding their employees with cutting their pay, cutting their benefits, and putting them in an even more destitute position. Though the same employees made the company richer during the pandemic, prior to the pandemic, And their reward for making the company richer is being broker. So the lack of positive reinforcement there, a lack of their security there, and disconnecting them from their humanity. Because a part of those John Deere worker strikes is the fact that not only are they underpaid, overworked with no benefits, but they don't get time to sleep. They don't get time to spend with their families. They don't get a real rest period. Literally, go to work, come back home just to go to work. In that order. Like a robot, like a slave. And they are standing up not only for themselves as John Deere workers, but also for other people behind them, because they understand they're not spring chickens. They're middle-aged white men. But they understand their sons are going to be in that factory. Their nephews are going to be in that factory. Their cousins are going to be in that factory. And if they don't stand up today, their sons are going to be fucked tomorrow. Most of those John Deere workers aren't even striking for themselves per se. It's more so they can guarantee the benefits for them is going to be passed down to their sons. Because you cannot rely on the capitalistic system to make do on their promises, right? You can't. Just like what happened to the American dream? What happened to the middle class lifestyle, right? The idea was you could buy your freedom, right? If you work a X amount of hours for X amount of price, then you would be able to buy your freedom. But freedom isn't for the given. Freedom is for the taken. Freedom is not given to anybody. Just like when they enslave you, imperialism, colonization, they didn't ask, hey, can I create a little bit of genocide? If you don't mind. Hey, can I just, take advantage of your natural resources? Just a tad bit. Hey, can I just enslave your population? Just a thought. When the imperialists did what they do and still do what they do, they come in with drones. They came in with cannons. They come with guns. They come with violence. They come with weaponry. That's how they reinforce their corruption, their demagoguery, their imperialism, their brutality, their oppression, their exploitation. They don't ask, they take. And through this pattern of violence and domination is how we have a worker society. Because as much of us who buy iPhones in the United States and Europe and elsewhere, yeah, a big portion of their profits is people buying their devices. But another portion of their profits is the fact that they can create suicide nets and not pay their workers. And China says, not a problem. A big portion of their profit is the fact that they can rape the ocean from bycatch. Those of us who like seafood, right? There's no way that you can obtain all that shrimp in just one section of the ocean, or all that salmon in one section of the ocean. There's no way. The ocean is free flowing. It'd be like trying to cast a net into the sky. You're going to catch anything that's flying overhead because the sky is just open. Same thing with the sea, it's just open. So when they fish, these companies, these corporations, they're not fishing like father and son, let's go on the boat, let's see what's in the water. No, they're coming in with big ass boats with nets than everybody on the boat. They drop the net into the ocean. Whatever happens to swim into the net, they catch. This means shrimp. This means salmon. This means whales. This means dolphins. This means turtles. So when they get caught up in the net, they're dead. So to catch the seafood is to catch everything in that perimeter. Even things that we don't eat, even things that were not meant to be killed, but they still get killed. That's what's depleting the ocean more than plastic. But because the corporations can spin the narrative of, oh, it's plastic in the ocean, that's what we should be worried about. And yes, that is something that we should be worried about. What they're not telling you that's even worse than plastic in the water is bycatch from seafood, from catching food from the waters. That was killing the ocean more than plastic. And you know what's killing the ocean more than bycatch? Fossil fuels. How many times these motherfuckers are gonna have oil leaks? That kills everything in the water, everything on shore, and affects people's health. We're not supposed to be that up close and personal with petroleum oil. We're not supposed to be that up close and personal with that. If the air can't even contain having that much of fossil fuels lingering in the air via carbon emissions, then what do you think that's doing to our health? People who work on oil rigs, people who live near these oil spills, what do you think that does to us? The workers. Causes of medical bills that the government won't decrease the price tag, and the corporations only found a way to increase the price tag. Ask Joe Manchin's daughter, who was selling 2 EpiPens. Y'all who have EpiPens or work with people who have EpiPens or know somebody who has an EpiPen, you know an EpiPen is not something that you can just skip on. You never know when you're going to have an emergency. You never know when you go somewhere and someone accidentally feeds you some peanuts and you're allergic and your throat closing. You can't not get an EpiPen. You cannot avoid getting an EpiPen. If you have an allergic reaction, you need that. But Joe Manchin's daughter, Democratic Congressman Joe Manchin, who also owns coal mines, which is also harmful to the population, harmful to the planet, his daughter, that he co-signed on a fictitious bachelor's degree, got her a fake bachelor's degree. How many of y'all got a bachelor's degree and student loans that you can't pay off of? Too bad you weren't born into the right family, because Joe Manchin could have gotten you a free bachelor's degree without spending your time, labor, and brain power in those classes, and without those student loans. You could have gotten it for free 99. Boom. If you was born into the right family, right? So Joe Manchin's daughter was able to get a job where she was supervising over the price of EpiPens. And you know what she done did? She said, if you want EpiPen and you live in West Virginia, you're going to have to buy 2. Not 1, but 2. You don't need 2. But she said she gonna give you 2. Non-negotiable. You're going to have to buy 2 at one time. And you're going to have to buy it more expensive than it was if you would have bought in 1 prior to her being executive of the EpiPens. Corruption. So as workers, we don't get that get out of jail free card. We don't get that leniency. We don't get that leg up. We don't get the cheat code. And you don't think that affects our mental illness? So we're told if we trade our labor, obviously with violence, because they didn't say it with sugar and spice and everything nice. If you trade your labor for this amount of money, then you'll be able to buy your freedom on the weekends, right? Or in the United States, imperialistic game plan, they'll just invade your country, bend your people's will, or they will create sanctions that prevents your population or the population that you belong to, let's say Venezuela, starve you out so you'll accept imperialistic parasitical exploitation. Meaning, I get to take your natural resources, pay pennies on the dollars, if that, reap all the benefits from your natural resources, and at least you get to live without the United States breathing down your neck and killing your kids. And that's your trade-off. Look into the banana wars, how that happened to be. And it's called banana wars because, yes, it has to do with bananas. And a war that was funded by the United States government. Fruit company, I think that's what the company is called, that sells bananas. Just like the United States, war in Afghanistan for 20 years, wasted $2.2 trillion over 20 years on a war that they failed just so they could get access to the oil, opium, and to cause imperialistic terrorism while calling the Taliban terrorists. But none of y'all actually did the research to figure out what the definition of Taliban is, and if you did, you would have realized that Taliban actually means student. Student in Arabic. So how does one become a terrorist when you call yourself a student? But then when you own the means of production, like Jeff Bezos owns the Washington Post, the media, the mainstream media, like Malcolm X said, they can turn the victim into the perpetrator and the perpetrator into the victim, right? Black Lives Matter. I was fearful for my life. 6 foot what? 200 what? With a gun on your holster, but you was shook, you was scared. And the national media will write that fictitious bullshit. Right? We're realizing that this is a bum deal. But we're not realizing that we need to stand together. Right? Because solidarity is the name of the game. One people united. United we stand, divided we fall. It's not just a cute little cliche, catchy cliche. It's real life. If you don't have a group of people to protect you, if you don't have a community to stand with you, then you are open season. And we're seeing that across the board. They told you if you got yourself a degree, if you got yourself into this committee, if you live in this neighborhood, if you do this and you do that, you would obtain this fictitious American dream. And now look at us. We work more hours than our parents and our grandparents, but we have more technology than our parents and our grandparents, but we're broker and we're more stressed and our mental health is in despair. But I thought the trade-off was we would be able to buy our freedom via retirement and via the weekend, which really is Saturday. Because Sunday is just really pre-Monday. We're just organizing our closets and our to-do list to get prepared for Monday. So our real vacation is Saturday. And we were told that that was a even exchange. At least us in the United States. Can't speak from other countries who are being terrorized on a daily basis. I'm pretty sure that was not the trade-off for them. But us in the United States, we were told that if we reach these certain benchmarks, we would be saved, we would be okay. And now we're realizing that's not the case. We work, again, more hours. Most people work a full-time and a part-time. Why? Because capitalism says so. So you won't have enough time to sit, to think, to organize, because you're always on the hamster wheel. And you don't think that triggers anxiety, triggers stress, triggers depression, on top of the fact that to survive in this modern landscape of society, you can't be your true self, you can't be authentic, you can't tell your boss what you really think about him or her or the company. So you go to another worker's place of work so you can brutalize them, so you can humiliate them, so you can talk down to them. Y'all get real crazy talking to fast food workers as if you're not a worker and they're not a worker. But because it's easier to talk down to someone you think is lower than you on the social economic scale, you think it's okay to berate them because you allow your boss to berate you. And we do that because the trade-off, the positive reinforcement, is the stability will be taken care of via trading your labor for this pay rate. And with that exchange, you'll be able to meet your basic needs, your food, water, shelter. But now we're realizing that on a minimum wage in any state, even the most red southern hick state, you can't afford on a minimum wage full-time employment a funky studio apartment, a funky one-bedroom apartment. Nowhere in the union, 50 states, that you could afford a one-bedroom on minimum wage.
Walmart. I just want to say that. Attention, all Walmart shoppers, associates, and managers. My name is Shauna from Cap 2, and I just want to come on here and say Henry is a racist, stinky. Giovanna is racist. Elias is a prick of a manager. This company fires black associates for no reason. This company treats their employees like shit, especially Cap 2, and Jimmy from Sporting Goods, Joseph the cashier, Larry from Garden Center. You are all perverts. And I hope you don't talk to your daughters the way you talk to me. Shout out to Ariel. Love you for getting me this job a year ago when I needed it most. Fuck the managers, fuck this company, fuck this position, and fuck that big lazy Chris Price. I fucking quit. I'm out.
You don't think that is pushing mental illness? Our basic needs can't be met? So if you can't pay rent, there's a good chance you probably can't afford food. And there's a good chance you're wearing hand-me-downs or have been worn out, and you probably haven't revamped your wardrobe in a few years. But capitalism will tell you that is better than anything else. So we're constantly on this hamster wheel. We're constantly trying to shift and change and contort and minimize and silence ourselves just to keep a job. And oftentimes a job that we don't even like. A job that doesn't even speak to our true calling, that doesn't speak to our passion, which isn't fulfillment. The Amazon fulfillment center is not really fulfilling to the human experience, to the soul experience, right? But capitalism says it doesn't matter. Disconnect from your humanity, right? Talk crazy to the worker, cancel them, dox them, shade them, drag them, as if you're not a worker. Y'all dragging each other, the workers. Meanwhile, the corporate class is just laughing as their stocks keep on rising, right? They tell you any other system is bad. Any other system is worse than the system that we have. That's why we're so scared of the term socialism and communism. Because that's the antithesis of the system we currently live in. A hierarchy. Only a few at the top, the majority at the bottom. Socialism is the antithesis of that. We all get our own. We all work together. We all get a slice of the pie. No one is running nobody. No one has more power than anybody. No one's dominating anybody. No one is mounting anybody. No one is wagging and poo-pooing their finger in people's faces. Everybody has an equal say. Everybody has an equal authoritative presence. And as a community, people make decisions. Women are not more or less than men. Older people are not more or less than younger people. It's égalitaire, libertaire, and not fraternité, because I'm not a man, but humanity. That's what we should be on. The basic principles of the French Revolution: equality or liberty and brotherhood. We lost that along the way. As a whole, we lost the way that we commune with each other. We lost a sense of community. Like, do you really know your neighbors? Like, dead ass, do you really know them? Do you really have conversations with them? 40, 50 years ago, who didn't know their neighbors? Who didn't know who was going in people's houses? Nosy, but people knew. Who didn't know whose kid is that on the block? Who didn't know who's who and who you need to talk to about getting this, that, and the third done? Today, we're all our own little bubble, dealing with these chagrins on our own, dealing with these anxieties on our own, dealing with these depressions on our own, dealing with this neuroticism on our own, while we're being squeezed to the middle, while we're being told what to say, how to say it, how to walk, how to talk, how to this, how to that. Because this capitalistic system, it wants you to be able to serve it without it realizing or recognizing your humanity. What point of you chefing up some fries gotta do with you wearing that goofy ass McDonald's outfit, other than the execs wanting you to feel less connected to your humanity, less connected to your individuality, less connected to your authenticity? So they want you to look the same, act the same, talk the same, be the same. Don't annoy them with your humanity. Don't annoy them with your indifference. Don't ignore them with your grievances. Don't annoy them with your humanity. Right? That's why they won't give you medical assistance, right? They won't give you Medicare for all. They won't give you benefits. They won't give you paid time off. Not because they can't afford it. John Deere workers showed that yes, they can afford it. They just rather not. Because we workers, we're real humans. They're psychopaths. They're narcissists. They're sociopaths. Why else would they fund black ops? Why else would they be in cahoots with the government and taking over countries, causing chaos abroad? Why else would they try to infiltrate and stop co-ops and stop employees from unionizing? They're psychopaths. The same corporate elites are the ones who fund the campaigns of these aspiring politicians. They are their donors. That's who they answer to. The same employer who employs you is the same employer who employs on the back end your politicians who pay you dust. Nancy Pelosi, Auntie Nancy. Yeah. Workers are told this is normal, this is acceptable, get in line and play your role. When you realize that what you were told as a child that you could be anything, do anything is a lie, you realize that there's this rat race that you can never actually win. You're always being pushed down further and further and further and further, closer into destitution. No different than the Slavs and the plebes and the serfs. It's no different than today. Matter of fact, back then, the plebes, the serfs, the slaves, they were tied to their slave owners' property. So if, let's say, for example, a rich white male, because back in those days, those are the only people that mattered, and still to this day, it seems to be those are the people who may not only be the people who matter, but tend to be the first people who get to talk and create the narrative that's going to be discussed. But nonetheless, back in those days, slaves were tied to the property. So when the property was sold and bought and sold and bought, those slaves were still there until the day that they dropped. How is that any different than chattel slavery when slaves were often written off like property? Like if Sir Bartholomew passes away, then Bartholomew Jr. would inherit the property, including the slaves. Now fast forward to modern society. How is that any different than us workers? How many of us tie ourselves and our living arrangements to our jobs, right? We move across country for our jobs. We move city to city from our jobs. Like we literally calculate our whole existence around our jobs. How is that any different than yesteryear? Granted, now there's conversations. There are also people who do work in this capacity, remote working. But we had the opportunity to do remote working prior to the pandemic. We have the same technology. Zoom was here, Wi-Fi was here, FaceTime was here. We had the same technology prior to the pandemic and now. 2021 when I'm recording this video. But we didn't advocate for remote working because in the corporate structure of things, how can your manager and supervisor breathe down your throat, micromanage you, hawk you if you're not there for them to berate you, there for them to stress you out, there for them to be laser focused on what you're doing and who you're doing it with. So now remote working is possible, or is even more of an option for workers, but only a specific type of worker, not the essential workers who are busting their asses during the pandemic and risking their lives, not even to make ends meet. I'm pretty sure they did not receive any pay raise during the pandemic. Ask the John Deere workers who are currently striking, but now it's an option because employees, workers are realizing that they have a little room to flex. A little, not a lot. But it could be a lot if we did indeed work together, organize together, create mutual aids together. But there's a lot of workers who are invested in the system because they really truly believe they will be the exception. They really truly believe that they will be the next multimillionaire, next billionaire class. Not understanding that to be a billionaire, to have that significant amount of wealth, it is not due to sheer good luck. It is not due to great financial investments. All of these multimillionaires and billionaires had a leg up. Did they not start from the bottom? Did they not start from destitution? And to be able to be a billionaire, you have to own the means of production. Again, the example of Apple. Apple, we all know, overprices its gadgets. So yes, from the true pricing of an iPhone and the price that they put on the label, that difference is the profit that they make. But also part of them reaping billionaire status, reaping that money, is through exploitation, because the people who are putting the phones together and the people who are going into the earth and picking out and digging out these precious metals, they don't have PPE gear. They're not getting vacation and paid time off and making sure that the factory's up to code. Like, no. So these people are getting their labor extracted from them for cheap, damn near for free, and sometimes it is for free, under the threat of violence. And then once they get these natural resources, the other point of exploitation is those in the factories putting the gadgets together. And another point of exploitation is those who buy the actual gadgets. So in those three levels, three areas of exploitation right there, that's how you become billionaire status. Not great investments and sheer luck. It's exploitation through and through. Corruption through and through. Left hand washes the right hand and they both wash each other's. Corrupting government officials. Creating the threat of terror. That's how you become a billionaire. And workers on all scales, whether you earn $500,000 a year or you are earning minimum wage or less, unless you own the means of production, you wake up and go to sleep and make money and you don't even gotta check your bank account, you're a worker. And on some scale, being exploited. And that's what creates mental illness. The fact that we are repressed from actually going for what we truly want to do. Like, how many people could have been the next surgeon, oral surgeon, but because they don't have the access to education, i.e. money, the world will never know. For all we know, the cure to cancer could be somewhere in the Amazon, but because being an explorer isn't a real job, and the only time we go to the Amazon is to fetishize tribal people and deplete the Amazon of its natural resources like lumber, we don't know. And for the most part, we don't really care. How many people are anxious because what they really want to say will cost them their career? So they go in to work day in and day out being someone that they're not, wearing masks. Then you realize that even if you do play the game of capitalism, your free time is only Saturday. But if you work umpteen amount of years, then you can retire if your job offers you a real retirement. Pension is the real retirement. 401k is another scam. But that's not this video, but definitely look it up. There was a whole documentary on it on PBS. 401ks are scams. The real support, the real stability, the real savings is in pensions. But most companies don't give you pensions because that would mean that they are responsible for taking care of you, especially when you become senior citizens. But again, because corporations' motto is exploitation, they don't want to be responsible for giving you shit, not even a livable wage. So you realize that you only get one day out of the week to really rest. And if you continue this bargaining deal, after 40, 50, 60 years, you could retire and quote unquote obtain your freedom. But how free are you when you 65 and you got a bad hip, a bad knee, you might have falsies, you might have with fake teeth, your vision might not be all the way 2020. You might be too tired. You might even forgot what you did last night. You old now. The vigor is gone from you now. And that's when they say you can have your freedom. When all your youth, all your vigor, all your determination is depleted from you. Even when they deplete you of your vigor, of your youth, they want to be able to toss you away and not do anything for you. Just like in third world countries. If you ever watched that movie, White Tiger, that's true life. In developing countries and third world countries, that's what happens. Once you're no longer useful, you can't provide for yourself, you become elderly or you become deformed in some way, shape, or form, or you have some type of illness, you're discarded. And that's what these corporations want to ultimately do. Use you up and discard you. And you not say a peep about it. Be okay with it. But we are human beings. We are not robots. We're not things. We're not property. We're not objects. We are human beings. We want to be loved. We want stability. And we yearn to be in touch with our nature. We yearn to have true commune. We yearn to be a part of something that's fulfilling and bigger than us. And that is what is causing mental illness. The lack of authenticity, the lack of real security, having your basic needs met, as well as the pressures of society to continue life as usual. When truth be told, it was never usual. Because freedom is for the taken, not the given. Hence, the Civil War. Hence, the Revolutionary War. I said I didn't want it to be long, and now I'm itching towards an hour. Shoot, let me wrap this thing up with this one point. And don't expect your identity politic figureheads to come and save you, because they're not. Right? This capitalistic system, again, it wants you to serve it. So these elites can play God. Elon Musk can play God. Bill Gates can play God. Bill Gates can tell you who and can get the vaccine, who can't get the recipe to the vaccine. Elon Musk can tell you what's technology, what's revolutionary, what's this, what's that, even though he's never worked a day in his life, even though he stole Tesla from these other white men who created the brand, who created the technology. He came through, became a quote-unquote silent investor, and then took over their idea, took over their brainchild like a real parasite capitalist does. Just like his daddy did with the emerald mines in South Africa. That's where he got his money, through apartheid. He don't want to tell you that now, don't he? Right? They swallow in these movements, right? LGBTQ, you get your representation. You got your Lil Nas X, you got your RuPaul, you got your Andy Cohen. You get your representation. You can even have an Anderson Cooper, right? But what does that do for gay rights in real life? The same corporations that will slap on our rainbow flag on shit will be the same corporations who will fund the GOP to make sure that you don't get your freedoms and your liberties. But rainbow everything, right? No different from the blacks, right? Black Lives Matter, Juneteenth, a fist in the air. But you still negatively infected when it comes to this whole pay wage thing, right? Generational wealth thing, right? Overworked, underpaid, last person employed, first person fired. The more things change, the more they stay the same. But they'll have Jay-Z as the NFL choir director. He's a businessman. That was the plan. Can't knock the hustle. Now he's the NFL choir director, and Kaepernick is the HR director for Nike, telling Nike what is offensive and what's not offensive. And somehow, some way, black people is free now. Because two Negroes got themselves a corporate deal. Now we is free. We past kneeling. So these corporate entities, they're able to swallow up movements, swallow up figureheads. But they still get that whole humanity thing incorrectly. Because they don't want to connect to your humanity. They find nature a nuisance. That's why they're depleting the earth of its natural resources. They're not human like us. That's why when they see us tear, when they see us struggle, when they see us go through poverty, it does nothing to them, right? all of the billionaires, all of the multimillionaires, there's nothing stopping them from cutting checks to reduce or eliminate poverty, eliminate destitution, eliminate hunger, eliminate these easily curable disease. But they don't. Not because they can't, they sincerely and truly don't give a fuck. It's a nuisance that you bring this shit to them. They're annoyed that you keep on talking about your disgruntled issues, your poverty, your hurts, your traumas. It annoys them. With all the money that they have, they go to sleep and wake up feeling nothing, indifferent for the people that they rape, pillage, and discard. And these are the same people we believe will solve for global warming when they don't want to even solve for giving you a livable wage. Never mind benefits. That's extra. They don't even want to give you the basics. Factoring everything that I just said, this is how modern society creates mental illness. Say what you want about the MAGA hats, but they're on to something about how them elites, them folks, them oligarch people, they're not set up the same as me and you. Reptilian or not, they're not set up the same because they thrive off of playing God and destroying the earth, which also means destroying you and your mental health. But y'all let me know what you think. Comment down below. Like, share, subscribe. You know the drill, just like every other YouTuber. Peace.